When a young woman's life is put at risk by a corrupt judge's biased ruling, Pam Bondi steps in, and what she says leaves the entire courtroom in stunned silence. Everything seemed routine in a Manhattan courtroom. Laughter filled the room as everyone anticipated the sentencing of what they assumed was a well-deserving criminal. But when the judge ordered the offender to be brought in, the atmosphere shifted. A young woman entered, and behind her, a small child ran in, crying out, "Mom!" A wave of confusion spread through the courtroom. Had there been a terrible mistake? Then came the moment that left everyone in stunned silence. Pam Bondi, the newly appointed U.S. The Attorney General, under the Trump administration, stepped into the courtroom, ready to set the record straight. Known for her firm stance on criminal justice, Bondi wasn't just there as an observer. She had come to oversee a ruling that could have a direct impact on the future of the U.S. legal system. Everyone took their seats, but the air was thick with unease. The judge, lounging back in his chair, barely acknowledged the young woman before him. His expression was indifferent, as if this were just another routine case, another name on a long list. The young girl, trembling, her tear-streaked face contorted in fear, clasped her hands together, her voice breaking as she pleaded. "I've done nothing wrong. It wasn't me. Please, what will my daughter do without me?" Her desperate eyes darted toward the little girl seated in the front row. The child, no older than 4, clutched the wooden bench, her small fingers gripping tightly as she watched her mother with wide, frightened eyes. Pam Bondi watched, her gaze sharp, her expression unreadable. She had seen plenty of criminals fake innocence, but something about this felt off. Her fingers drummed lightly on the polished table as she studied the scene, catching details others missed. The judge's body language, too relaxed, his impatience, too obvious. There was no interest in justice here, only a decision already made. The judge let out a bored sigh, flipping through the case file without care. Barely glancing at the pages, he began to read the ruling in a monotone voice, his gavel poised to strike. Pam's fingers tightened around the case file in front of her. Her eyes scanned the documents quickly, trained to catch inconsistencies others overlooked. And then, there it was, a date that didn't match, a witness statement that contradicted the evidence. A cold wave ran through her. She flicked her gaze back to the judge. He wasn't just careless, he was complicit. The realization sent a pulse of anger through her. This wasn't justice, this was a sham. Pam snapped the file shut. "Enough. You belong behind bars." The words rang out like a gunshot. The judge froze mid-sentence, his mouth slightly open. Gasps rippled through the room. Heads turned, eyes widened. Who was she talking about? But Pam wasn't looking at the defendant. She was staring straight at the judge. The judge's eyes flickered in confusion as the words echoed through the courtroom, his grip tightening around the gavel. His gaze swept across the room, searching for the source of the bold defiance. "Who dares to disobey my rulings in my court?" His voice, laced with irritation and authority, boomed across the silent chamber. But as he turned toward the direction of the voice, his breath hitched. There she was, Pam Bondi, the U.S. Attorney General. The blood drained from his face. He had spent years on the bench, commanding power with every ruling, but the piercing gaze locked onto him now was unlike anything he had faced before. Pam Bondi didn't flinch. Her posture was rigid, her shoulders squared, exuding a presence that swallowed the room whole. She wasn't just another attorney challenging his authority. She was the embodiment of justice, staring him down with a death stare sharp enough to cut through steel. Slowly, she stood, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she took a step forward. The air itself seemed to thicken, every set of eyes locked onto her. Then, with a voice calm yet laced with steel, she delivered her words, words that would be remembered long after the trial. "This is not your court, and justice does not bow to corruption." Pam Bondi's eyes never wavered, as the judge's gaze faltered under the weight of her stare. The room was utterly silent, as if the very air had paused in anticipation of what would come next. The judge's lips twitched nervously, his fingers hovering near the gavel but unable to bring himself to strike it. The atmosphere had shifted from one of routine to something far more charged, like a storm gathering on the horizon. She could hear the faint shuffle of papers from the defense table, the quick intakes of breath from the spectators, the tension creeping into every corner of the room. But Pam didn't let it affect her. She had been in high-stakes situations before, but this moment was unlike any other. It wasn't about power. It wasn't even about winning. It was about truth. And this judge, this man in front of her, was standing in its way. She stepped forward, the sound of her heels striking the marble floor punctuating her every movement. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. The judge's eyes flickered to his gavel, his fingers twitching in an almost subconscious attempt to maintain control. But it was clear now. The power had shifted. The balance of authority was no longer his to command. Pam's lips parted slightly, and the room, already hanging on the edge of silence, seemed to lean in a little closer, waiting for her words. She wasn't just speaking to the judge. She was speaking to the entire room, to everyone who had ever sat in a courtroom where the truth was ignored. She could feel the weight of every pair of eyes trained on her. "I see your gavel, Judge," she said, her voice calm yet unwavering, her words carrying an undeniable authority. "You think that gavel gives you power, that it makes you the ultimate decider of truth. But the gavel is just a tool. The real power in this courtroom lies in the truth, and you've forgotten that." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Pam didn't flinch. She could feel their curiosity. People wanted to see where this was going, wanted to see if she could back up her words. The judge, however, remained silent, staring at her with furrowed brows, unwilling to let go of the illusion of his control. He was accustomed to silencing anyone who dared challenge him, but there was something different about this woman, something that made him question whether he could continue his routine as if nothing had changed. "You're judging a case that's based on lies, Judge," Pam continued, her tone sharp, every syllable deliberate. "You know it, I know it, and everyone in this room knows it." The judge's jaw tightened, and he let out an exasperated sigh. "This court has heard all the evidence." "The evidence?" Pam interrupted, raising her hand as if to stop him mid-sentence. "You've seen the evidence, but have you really seen it? Have you noticed the discrepancies, the contradictions, the things that don't add up?" She took another step forward, and the room seemed to lean in with her, as if they could feel the heat rising. Pam opened the case file in front of her, flipping through the pages with practiced precision. The judge's eyes followed her every move, a bead of sweat forming on his brow as he realized what was coming. "Let me show you something," Pam said, her voice quiet but commanding. She held up the file for the judge to see, the pages stark under the bright courtroom lights. "This date," she said, tapping the page with a slender finger, "is wrong. And this witness statement, it contradicts the physical evidence. You've missed it, Judge." The judge's gaze dropped to the file, his face tightening as he leaned forward. He'd seen the files before, of course, but now, with Pam pointing out the errors so plainly, it was impossible to ignore the flaws in the case. His confident demeanor began to crack, and the once unshakable authority in his posture seemed to waver. "I've reviewed the file thoroughly," he muttered, attempting to assert control, but the words were weaker now, uncertain. "No, you haven't," Pam shot back, her voice steady and strong. You've skimmed it. You've rushed through it because you've already made up your mind. And that's where you're wrong, Judge. That's where you failed." The room was deathly silent. Pam's words hung in the air, every pair of eyes now trained on her, watching as she dismantled the judge's facade piece by piece. The audience, at first unsure of what to make of her sudden intervention, now seemed to be leaning in, waiting for the truth to be fully revealed. The young woman, still trembling, wiped her eyes, her hope flickering back to life as she watched Pam speak with unwavering confidence. The judge's mouth opened, but no words came out. His brow furrowed as he struggled to respond, to assert some semblance of control, but the truth had already started to gain the upper hand. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly rattled, but unwilling to admit defeat. Pam took a step back, crossing her arms over her chest, her eyes never leaving the judge's. The silence stretched for a moment longer, the weight of the room pressing in on everyone until she spoke again, this time her voice cold and calculating. "I'm not here to challenge you for sport, Judge. I'm not here to make a spectacle. I'm here because this case is wrong. It's unjust, and you're the one who's supposed to uphold justice." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But what I see here is a man who has forgotten what justice really means, someone who would rather keep the gavel in his hand than seek the truth." A sharp intake of breath came from the defense table, the small gasp of someone who recognized the depth of Pam's words. The young woman, still wiping away her tears, looked up, her eyes now wide with hope, a glimmer of belief beginning to rekindle in her. The judge's gaze flickered nervously as the weight of her words hung in the air. He was losing the room, losing control of the very space he had once commanded so easily. For the first time, Pam smiled, not with warmth, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knew they had the truth on their side. Her posture was composed, every inch of her poised like a predator watching its prey. "You're not the one who gets to decide what's right here, Judge," she said, her voice carrying with deliberate finality. "You don't get to make up the rules as you go. You're here to serve justice, not your ego, and what I see today is a failure to do just that." A faint whisper traveled through the audience. Some nodded in agreement. Others sat in stunned silence. The judge's face reddened, his features twisted in a mix of frustration and embarrassment. He was cornered, and he knew it. The audience had seen it too, his flaws, his rush to judgment, his unwillingness to look beyond his own authority. They were beginning to see him as less of a figure of justice and more of someone who had let power corrupt his decisions. Pam Bondi wasn't just fighting for the young woman in front of her. She was fighting for the integrity of the law itself. And with every word, every gesture, she made that clear. This was no longer just about the case. It was about something much bigger. The judge's hand trembled as he reached for the gavel, but Pam was faster. She stepped forward again, her eyes now cold, calculating and unwavering. "Do you really want to continue down this path, Judge?" she asked, her voice low but forceful. "Or are you going to do what's right and admit that you were wrong?" The judge hesitated, his mind racing. The room had shifted. The atmosphere had gone from one of complacency to one of undeniable tension. The gavel, the symbol of his authority, now felt like nothing more than a weight he could no longer bear. And the longer he held on to it, the more the truth seemed to slip away from his grasp. In the back of the room, a few of the spectators shifted in their seats, the realization dawning on them. They had come here today to witness a ruling, a simple ruling they had thought. But now they were witnessing something far more significant, a challenge to the very foundation of the courtroom, and Pam Bondi was leading the charge. The judge's grip on the gavel slackened, and for the first time he looked unsure of himself. Pam didn't need to say another word. She had already won. The audience could feel the shift. A collective breath seemed to be drawn in as the judge set the gavel down gently, his posture slumping with the quiet acceptance of defeat. Pam's victory wasn't just in her words. It was in her unwavering commitment to the truth, and in the undeniable power of logic and reason that had now overtaken the courtroom. The young woman, who had been on the brink of despair, now looked up at Pam with eyes full of gratitude and hope. She was still unsure of what would come next, but she knew one thing for certain. Today, she had been heard. And for the first time, there was a chance for real justice. Pam Bondi's words shattered the tense silence in the courtroom. The judge, momentarily stunned, stared at her, trying to process the unexpected confrontation. The air hung heavy with tension, the entire room frozen in anticipation of his next move. The young girl, still trembling, gazed at Pam with a mix of disbelief and hope, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Thank you." Pam's expression remained stoic as she met the young woman's eyes, offering nothing more than a brief nod. Without waiting for a response from the judge, she straightened her back and turned on her heel, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she made her way to the exit. The judge, still processing the weight of her interruption, slowly placed the gavel back down. Defeated, his attempt to regain control fell flat, and the courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations, though Pam paid no attention. As she reached the door, Pam paused for a moment, her hand resting lightly on the handle. She glanced back briefly, taking in the scene, the judge's faltering authority, the young girl's quiet relief, and then, with a final look of resolve, she exited without another word. Outside, the world would soon erupt with praise. But in that moment, Pam Bondi walked away, humbly and quietly, as if she had done nothing extraordinary. If this courtroom showdown had you hooked, the next chapter will captivate you even more. Click the video on your screen to immerse yourself in another riveting story, one that will push boundaries, ignite discussions, and resonate long after the final moment. Don't just watch, live it. Your next adventure is just a click away.